Welcome to Justice for Breakfast, hosted by the Public Justice Center. I'm Janice Jones. I'm the Executive Director here at the PJC. I use she, her pronouns. The Public Justice Center's mission has been to use legal impact tools to fight for social, economic, and racial justice since our inception in 1985. And we are fight for the rights of our neighbors in Maryland and beyond. So I'm glad to see everyone here this morning. I'm glad that you were able to join us. I see folks populating in. I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record with regard to making sure everybody's aware that this session is being recorded. And if that's an issue, you can turn off your camera and then invite everyone to introduce themselves in the chat if they would like. So my understanding is Justice for Breakfast has been an ongoing PJC activity for at least the last 2 decades. So we have a long history of inviting folks in to highlight and inform our communities about what we're doing, what our projects are up to, our successes, our challenges, where we need your help. Of course, to thank you for your ongoing support. But Justice for Breakfast is just a community check-in with folks first thing in the morning that we've been doing for the last 2 decades, and it's worked out pretty good so far. Today's session is being brought to us by our Health and Benefits Equity Project, and it's focused on the replacement of stolen benefits, a key area of a lot of media attention this last couple years and community action. So I'm going to say some quick thank yous before I flip it to our lead head mistress, attorney, guru, lady extraordinaire, Miss Ashley Black, who until very, very end this project solo and managed to do so much work in this area and raise so much attention to this issue and other issues regarding health and benefits. But real quick before I flip it to Ashley to put the bones around today's discussion and introduce her new teammate, I want to thank PJC staff and board on the call today, particularly our health and benefits equity team, as well as our development team. Any board members on the call today? I see one couple here or there. Thank you for joining us. Our partners and our panelists for showing up this morning, and we really appreciate your ongoing support for PJC and your willingness to partner with us in our almost 40-year mission of our work. We couldn't do our best work without you. Thank you so very much. Our funders, stakeholders, and friends, I see a couple of them on the call. Again, we always thank our folks that are willing to support us with their time, talent, and treasure in how we accomplish our mission, and just a big thank you and how much we appreciate you and how much we need you for our work. And with that, I'll flip it to Ashley.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome. As Denise said, my name is Ashley Black. I'm the lead attorney for our Health and Benefits Equity Project. We advocate to expand and protect healthcare and public benefits access for low-income families and individuals in Maryland. And our mission is to eliminate racial disparities in health outcomes and enable every Marylander to attain their highest level of health. For the last, I guess since PJC started, and I guess that would be for several decades, this project has been a one-person project, and we just recently added a new member. David, did you want to take a moment to introduce yourself and your position at PJC?
Sure. I'm David. I'm the new he, him pronouns. I'm a new paralegal with the Health and Benefits Project. I'm coming from working with United Workers, learned to be an organizer there, and I'm excited to do some good work here on this project as well.
Thank you so much, and we're excited to have you. And before we jump into our topic this morning, which is going to be on EBT skimming theft, I want to give each of our presenters an opportunity to introduce themselves. They have been our partners in all of this advocacy. And so JD, could you kick us off with your name, organization, and what you do?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name's JD Robinson. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm with Maryland Hunger Solutions. We were founded in 2007 by the Food Research and Action Center, and at Maryland Hunger Solutions, I am the coordinator for program coordinator for SNAP. So basically anything and everything related to do with the SNAP program, from outreach to advocacy to legislation. I am working on it with the rest of my team. I see some members on here. Hello, everyone. Mostly just to provide education to folks about the program, make sure that they're maximizing their benefits in any way that they can, and then also at the state and federal level, defending the program, making sure that we can get the most out of it by getting additional programs, and just making sure that access and eligibility is clear across the board and that we're expanding it at any chance that we can get. And I guess I'll kick it over to Michelle.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Medeo, she, her pronouns. I work at the Homeless Persons Representation Project, or HPRP, as the Director of Economic Justice. At HPRP, we provide free legal representation to people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, and we allow the direct representation to inform our engagement in wider systemic advocacy to end homelessness, to increase access to public benefits, economic and racial justice, and we do this together with people experiencing homelessness. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for attending.
Great. Thank you. And as I said, we have all been partners in this advocacy, in thinking about this and advocating for it. But there have been so many people who've also been involved that I'll also mention. So our topic today is on the nationwide rise in EBT skimming theft. This is an issue that has financially and really emotionally devastated thousands of Maryland families. And what we want to ask you first before we get started is, have you heard about this issue before? So if you could use the thumbs up reaction, we just want to see how many people have heard about this as they're coming into this presentation. And as people are using the thumbs up reaction, I'll keep going. So for those who have heard about this issue, for those who haven't, we hope that everyone will learn something new today from this presentation and share that with the people that you know and people that you know who are experiencing this issue. But this presentation really is a celebration today because Marylanders will finally have some relief from this issue with the successful passage of this new law. First, we want to thank Senators Katie Fry-Hester and Ben Kramer and delegates Robin Lewis and Tiffany Alston for their championship of this important bill, as well as Chair Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, who helped us, who prioritized this bill and brought us all to the table together to work with DHS on ironing out the language. We also want to thank our partner organizations that we've been working with. There are many of them, too many to name, but they supported this legislation on behalf of their client communities. And we'd like to thank the new administration of the Department of Human Services, Secretary Rafael Lopez, for his allyship on this issue, and again, coming to the table to work with us on how best we could help the victims of EBT skimming theft. Additionally, we want to thank media for raising awareness on this issue and the massive amount of coverage that featured stories from directly impacted people. And last but not least, definitely not least, we want to thank every person with lived experience who shared their personal story with legislators, media, and us. I think I can speak for all of us here when I say that this bill would not have passed without the tremendous push from community members. So thank you. And with that said, our main goal here today is really to try and center the lived experience of people who've gone through this. So we're going to start with a video. This is Tiara and Bridget, who are sharing their story on their experience with theft of benefits, and this was on WUSA.
Tonight, low-income families in our area who rely on federal food assistance are being scammed. This is connected to that report we brought you earlier this year about those credit card skimming devices in Prince George's County. Well, police say thieves have used those devices to steal $700,000 worth of SNAP benefits just this year.
Our most vulnerable neighbors. Yeah. Tonight, our Matthew Torres explores how Maryland families are being affected and why they feel not enough's being done to help.
Look at your toes! There's a lot to juggle as a mother. But for Tiara Tyson, nothing has felt more up and down than the last 24 hours.
I was screaming on the street, screaming, like who would do this to me?
She's one of 658,000 Maryland residents who rely on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, to feed herself and 5 kids. The federal government provides the benefits, including other cash assistance using EBT cards. But for someone who expects $1,500 every month, Tyson unexpectedly received bad news.
I just found out all my money, my cash was basically off my card. I want to get my baby a cup, swipe my card and look at my receipt. I have $11 and some change on my card.
This mother says she was scammed after using her card at an ATM machine. The same thing happened to Bridget Jackson.
Very frustrated, stressed out.
Jackson says her account, which receives more than $600 a month, has been wiped out more than once. With $0 in her pocket, she worries how to support her 15-year-old daughter.
A lot of us are going to be homeless out here, and I'm scared that I'm about to be one. Because if my lights get cut off, I'm out. My water get cut off, I'm out.
SNAP recipients across the country and convenience.
All right, so I'm going to turn things to JD to talk to us about what an electronic benefits transfer card is.
Sure. Yeah. So, kind of the root of all this issue kind of dials all the way back to what this card is. So EBT, electronic benefits transfer, was originally, kind of realized as a system to allow benefits to be moved from the kind of the source of it at a processing place to a retailer to then be used by folks to swipe their card. It works just like a debit card. You swipe it, you have a PIN, you can change your PIN if you would like, and then this can be used for both SNAP and SNAP or food stamps, and then cash benefits as well. They've been used in all states since about 2004, since we transitioned from the old food stamps method into the 21st century, if you will. And this card is essentially, like I said, a debit card. Benefits come in on a monthly basis. People usually expect the same amount every month, barring any sort of changes to their case. And then the card itself, I'll talk a little bit more about like the overall security implementations of it and kind of why we've seen this meteoric rise. But then I'm going to pass it over to Ashley really quickly just to kind of talk about skimming theft in general, which is kind of the main culprit.
Great, thank you. And you may have heard about this issue before, actually, with credit and debit cards in the past. I know there was a time where this was happening a lot to people at gas stations, but we haven't seen it on this level, targeting our most vulnerable citizens in Maryland and their benefits. So what this is EBT skimming theft. It's where a person who is stealing these benefits would attach a device to a point of sales machine or the PIN pad. It can look like an overlay, like just a rubber overlay that goes over top the keypad, and you would not know. They're very difficult to spot, but they're extremely easy to place. Typically, people who do this work in teams where one will distract the cashier while the other slips this onto the PIN pad. And what happens is when someone goes to swipe their EBT card, their PIN number and their card number is stolen. The card can then be cloned and used in another state. The money can also be withdrawn from an ATM. So typically what has happened is people won't find out that their benefits have been stolen until they go to use that card or until they go to an ATM and see that their balance has been drawn down. So what we've been seeing is this has been an issue around the country. It has been tens, if not at this point, hundreds of millions of dollars that have been stolen from benefits recipients. In Maryland, the data that we have from the Department of Human Services for 2022 was that it was over $1.6 million that was stolen from more than 2,300 households. We do believe that that's underreporting, and we'll talk about that later, but we think that number has been underreported and that it's likely much more money in many more households. And this is compared to 2021, where we only saw about $92,000 stolen in benefits from a little over 100 households. So this has had a tremendous increase in EBT skimming theft. And two big reasons why this theft has continued. Number one is just the lack of security protections for EBT cards, which JD will get into, so I won't touch on that. And then the second one is there's been a strong lack of action on both the state and federal level prior to December 2022 to make the victims of this type of theft whole again. So I'll pass it back to JD.
Sure. And I will preface this entire section by saying none of us came into this as cybersecurity experts or card security experts, but as with all legislation, there's always something you kind of have to learn a lot about as you're kind of working on it over the course of months. So I actually touched a lot on the skimming portion of the theft that was occurring, which is essentially, there's a fake device on top of a real device, a card's data is scanned and then it's stolen, and then the card is cloned onto a blank debit card, which can then be used for other, using that person's benefits, whether taking cash out of an ATM or using their SNAP benefits at a grocery store or other retailer. On top of this, there's also something called phishing, which is another kind of common scheme where someone posing as a DHS employee or really just anyone that may have access to state data asks for personal identifying information, whether that's a social security number, date of birth, or just even directly what is your card information and what is your PIN, and people willingly give that information up, not knowing that this person is not indeed someone working at a state agency. And when I've seen some of the texts that people have sent me of people of doing these phishing scams, you kind of see why. They're getting more and more sophisticated as the days go on. And then last but definitely not least is just the overall cybersecurity structure of the system at large, which is unfortunately fairly weak. For people that have been in Maryland for a while, we're not strangers to cybersecurity attacks. We've had some happen at DHS. We've had some happen at our Baltimore city government. I know that has been shored up over time, but this is kind of the scary, brave new world era that we're kind of living in, where cybersecurity attacks are going to become more and more common and something that we do need to look at. Not the focus of today's presentation, though. Going back to the cards, as Ashley was mentioning, when you swipe that card, and that's the only thing you can do with an EBT card right now is you can't swipe it, unlike our debit and credit cards that have a chip on them. That chip allows for not only end-to-end encryption, meaning when you insert it or swipe it, it's extremely hard to steal any sort of data off of it. It's that it's actually really hard to track as well. So when you swipe an EBT card, that data can be stolen almost instantaneously on top of the PIN that you enter into the keypad as well. Same thing goes for any sort of user notifications. When there's mysterious activity on our bank cards, our bank notifies us immediately, gives us the option to shut things down, and even says, all right, we'll go ahead and get you your money back right away. At the time, this was not an option for anyone using EBT. In fact, there's still not options currently to notify folks that there may be mysterious activity on their card. And last but definitely not least is just that SNAP and cash benefits aren't protected in any way. Unlike our money that is at the bank, those funds are protected. Those are backed up by the banks. They will reimburse them all immediately. Again, at the time, this was not the case for food and SNAP, cash benefits. So what we're kind of looking at going into the legislation and also looking to the future is just that there needs to be security updates across the board. And first and foremost is just protecting cards and protecting card holders. So that means we need to get chips in these cards, making sure that there's card locking features. And this is something that we kind of learned about over the course of this legislation, is that the EBT vendors that do exist, Maryland's being conduit. There's another one that exists. I told myself I was going to remember it this time, but really there's only two. There's only two EBT vendors, or processors as we call them, and these are basically the monoliths that help with the EBT transfer system that turns that cloud money into usable funds. And because there's only two, there's a bit of a monopoly on the whole process. But they have promised that there will be card locking features on the way soon. Essentially, once you get an EBT card, you can call into a number or use an app to lock the card from use, either say no usage out of state, or I'm going to turn it on to use it now. I'll turn it off to use it now. That needs to be happening as soon as possible. But then also just overall, the entire EBT system needs to have a cybersecurity overhaul. There's word of there may have been a data breach a while ago that may have led to an additional rise in some of the theft that we've been seeing recently. And also just the state systems need to be tightened up as well. Cybersecurity, thankfully, I think, again, because Maryland has seen a couple of attacks recently, has been front of mind for a lot of what we've been doing. But I think this whole issue is just an opportunity to make sure that, again, across the board, EBT, all of our state systems have secure and tightened up security measures. And I think I'll pass it over to Michelle to talk about what happened to households due to this theft.
So I think it was very clear, you know, when I was re-listening to Tiara and Bridget sharing their experiences, I got just chills thinking back to, you know, how this kind of all started. And back in early 2022, we started getting calls from families and individuals who just went to use their cards. They were at the grocery store, they had, you know, purchased all their food and were in line with their children to pay, and the retailer told them there's nothing on the card. Or they go to the ATM to make a withdrawal to pay their rent and their utility bills for that month, and the balance is zero. And it just, you know, the Department of Human Services, which was under different leadership at that time, just completely failed families. Families would go and say, you know, nothing was on my card. When they pulled up the history of spending, usually the transactions were very suspicious. It was like in the middle of the night, maybe 2 a.m., a couple hours after the department deposited that next month's benefits on, the benefits were completely wiped off. And of course, 2 a.m., you know, folks are at home with their kids sleeping, or it was clear that the benefits were used out of state. Maybe day one, a person made a purchase in Baltimore, and then an hour later, the purchase was in California. So very, very clear that this was, you know, had nothing to do with the intended household spending the money, and that some suspicious activity was happening. Even though the department could clearly see that in many cases, the department just said, we are not replacing benefits. This was a policy choice within the legal framework, which we'll talk about later. The department absolutely could have reimbursed families and individuals for theft, but they chose not to. And so what this meant was folks had to figure out how to survive for an entire month without the food or income that they were eligible to receive. And I think it's important to highlight that these programs, SNAP and cash assistance, like temporary cash assistance and temporary disability assistance program, these are means-tested programs. So by definition, to even qualify to receive these benefits, you have to have a very, very low income or no income at all, because there's no funds available to spend on food or basic assistance like rent and transportation and housing costs. So the department knew that folks, because they qualified for these benefits, which are entitlement programs, meaning if you qualify, you meet the basic qualifications, you are entitled to receive them. There's no discretion about, you know, whether you should or shouldn't. If you meet the eligibility, you're entitled to receive them. Despite all of that, the department was still saying there's nothing we can do. And so folks were provided no assistance, and it was just awful. Advocates organized a sign-on letter back in September of 2022 asking the department to replace benefits and to enhance security, and we got no response. These were organizations from around the state just sharing different experiences we've heard from the communities we serve, and we didn't receive a reply at all. The Senate Finance Committee of the General Assembly decided to hold an oversight hearing with the department in September. I think the Senate had heard about this issue both through constituent phone calls and from media reports. And so even though the General Assembly wasn't in session, they held a special hearing to call in the secretary and ask, you know, can you use the $2 billion in revenue that the state has, wouldn't cost all that, but there is the funding. Can you use that to replace benefits? And the secretary at that time, Secretary Padilla, testified and said the department will not be replacing benefits, and that this is an issue that belongs with law enforcement. The secretary wanted to focus on law enforcement, but of course for victims of this theft, that meant nothing because they needed their replacement benefits. So this was having such a harmful impact. Folks were not able to cover rent, receiving eviction notices, utility shutoff notices. Folks could not purchase food, and so a lot of parents we spoke with had to make the really difficult decision of, feeding their kids with the little food they had, and the parents skipping meals because there just wasn't enough to purchase food. So this drove families that were already experiencing poverty deeper into poverty. You can't go back in time and feed your family. And so the harm was pretty deep and irreparable. So advocates approached Senator Kramer, who was actually very supportive and vocal at the oversight hearing. We approached him and asked would he agree to sponsor a bill requiring the Department of Human Services to replace benefits when they were stolen and to enhance security of cards to try to curb this theft from happening in the future. He was very supportive, agreed to sponsor it. Delegate Tiffany Alston was the cross-file in the House, and then Senator Hester actually had her own bill. She was also very interested in this issue, and Delegate and Chair Pena Melnick brought us all together, and Delegate Robin Lewis was also a sponsor of the legislation. So they brought all the bill sponsors, advocates, and the now new secretary, so the Maryland Department of Human Services new secretary in mid-January, Rafael Lopez, who said from almost day one that he wanted to lead the country in the response to this. So it was clear that the department wanted to take a new direction. So we all came to the table, worked out a consensus draft that we were all happy with, and that is the bill we're going to be talking about today. I'm still on.
I was going to say, could you share with us those legal arguments on, about this issue?
Yeah, so we were representing individuals and families in administrative appeals, challenging the department's decision not to replace benefits. This is before the legislation. And so I'll just highlight kind of an overview of the legal argument and then also the department's response, just to emphasize how this really became pretty clear that there were two different sides to this, and we did need a legislative response. So the legal argument for replacement of stolen benefits, it looks different depending on the program and the individual regulations, but overall, the argument was that SNAP and cash benefits are entitlement programs. And so if a family is eligible for these programs and does not receive their benefit, they're still entitled to, and it's the department's obligation to issue the benefits for that month. Also, the programs have different federal and or state regulations that require the department to issue what's called an underissuance or an underpayment when one occurs. So if a family is eligible for $600 in a given month and received zero, the department has a legal obligation to issue an underissuance of the $600 that the family never received. The department also had a policy memorandum. It was an internal policy memorandum that they issued on April 5th of 2022, which said that although they were replacing temporarily, they were replacing cash benefits for a period of time, not SNAP, just cash. The department announced on April 5th, 2022, that they would no longer be issuing cash benefits as a replacement. And so another way that we challenged this was that the department's decision not to replace benefits was arbitrary and capricious, and that the department did not follow the required rulemaking process in the Administrative Procedures Act when it issued this internal memorandum, as opposed to following the required process of issuing a regulation to change policy. So the department's response, legal argument, was that federal and state law do not, even though they don't prohibit reimbursement of stolen benefits, they also don't require the department to reimburse. And so the department felt because the law was not explicit one way or the other, the department has the discretion to set its own policy on this, and if it chooses not to reimburse, that's legal because it doesn't contradict law otherwise. The department also felt that no underissuance or underpayment occurred because the department felt that it was paying the correct benefit. By making a deposit on the EBT card, the household received the benefits. Even if it was subsequently stolen by an unauthorized third party, the department felt it did its job by depositing the benefits onto the card. The department felt it did not act in an arbitrary or capricious manner because by implementing a policy not to replace stolen benefits, the department did not violate a law because there was no law. And finally, the department felt their policy to no longer replace cash benefits had a rational basis because Maryland, it felt, could not allocate funds to compensate victims of stolen benefits. So you have this legal dispute, and the appeals that we had, the administrative law judges consistently were ruling in favor of the department and basically saying, because the law does not explicitly require the department to replace benefits, the administrative law judges felt that they could not order the department to do that. And the department, and that one ALJ actually even said in her opinion, we need a legislative fix. If we are going to require the department, we need the law to very clearly instruct that the department has to replace benefits. So it became clear that the administrative appeals process was not going to result in quick relief for our clients, and that we needed to pursue other strategies like legislative reform.
Thank you for sharing that, Michelle, and really breaking that down for us to better understand the arguments for and against this. All right. So I'm going to talk a bit about the community outreach and advocacy on this legislation. You know, I think typically it can be hard sometimes to find people who are experiencing an issue and be able to, you know, build that sort of this encouragement to share their story. In this situation, that was not hard. There were so many people that had experienced this issue and were very eager and determined to tell their story to help to make this right. So it was a combination of things that advocates did. One, legislative advocacy workshops. This was an idea of the Homeless Persons Representation Project, where Michelle works, to have these legislative advocacy workshops to not only teach community members, primarily those in shelters, how the legislative process works, what legislative advocacy looks like, and what new legislation was brewing around benefits programs and providing opportunities for people who wanted to testify in support of these bills to be able to do so. And the EBT skimming theft bill was one of the bills that folks learned about and got really excited about weighing in on. And then the second thing was through both these workshops and individual outreach to community members, advocates understanding and working with community members to create a list of non-negotiables. So what that means is essentially when you have a bill, you put forward your ideal bill, everything that you want in it, and as it goes through the legislative process, inevitably it is going to be changed. Some things are going to be taken out. Time frames might be changed, and it may not look exactly like what you originally put in and what you originally wanted. So we wanted to understand from community members, what are the things that if they're not in this bill, as it goes through the process, would be non-negotiable, something that would cause us to stop supporting the bill or request with our bill sponsors that they pull the bill. And then the next was preparing directly impacted community members to testify about their experience. Many had never testified before the legislature before or written testimony. So ensuring that we had, written templates, time reserved for people to be able to write their testimony and, work through it with us. Just making sure people had those opportunities to do that. And next thing was connecting community members who really wanted to tell their story to the media and did not want to remain anonymous, to connect them with reporters who were reaching out to share these stories and cover EBT skimming theft. And I think that was really critical to raising more public awareness. And then the last thing I'll say is that, when it comes to legislative advocacy, there are so many barriers and inequities that really prevent people living in poverty from being able to even access the legislative process. you need to have a computer or at least internet access to be able to sign up to testify on a bill or submit testimony. If you don't have transportation, it can be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to use public transportation to get to Annapolis. Hearing days are very long. You don't know when your bill is going to be called. So if childcare is an issue, you may not even be able to come down to testify. I know we had a couple people who really wanted to be there in person to share their story at the bill hearings and couldn't because of childcare issues. And so what we did as organizations is we really had a discussion on how can we utilize our organizational resources to address these inequities. So that meant doing things like reimbursing travel costs, making sure people could take an Uber and get down to Annapolis, paying for their food while they were in Annapolis, and including for their children if they needed to bring their children, making sure people understood what the day would look like, you know, that bill hearings, you're typically not going to start on time, and also ensuring that folks who attended the legislative advocacy workshops were paid for that time, because that is a job to learn about this work, and we want to treat and honor lived experience as expertise. So I will move to our next slide, which are, we wanted to, like I said, we wanted to center lived experience in this presentation. So we wanted to share some testimony from the actual bill hearing. So this first one is Renee.
Hi, my name is Renee. I'm a Maryland resident. Well, first I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'm a Maryland resident. I reside in Baltimore County, Essex. I'm here today to support Senate Bill 2, which would require the Department of Human Services to refund SNAP and cash benefits when they're stolen in EBT skimming theft. It would also require DHS to make EBT cards more secure to prevent future theft. Back in August of last year, roughly $3,000 were stolen from my 3 children and I. I've literally contacted everyone from police, went to the police stations, social services, OIG, and even the Department of Agriculture to see what can be done, just to be told that unfortunately this is happening to a lot of families and that funds cannot and will not be reimbursed. I was devastated even after the store showed videos of the people that stole everything, including the tag numbers to their car. I was still informed that cannot be refunded of anything, even the back food stamps that I've waited so long to get, which was the $3,000. It was very hard for myself and my children. I'm a single mother, 3 kids. I work as a CNA, but just don't make enough to pay all the bills and pay for food. So we really depended on the monthly deposit of the food stamps each month. It became much harder for us after losing the stamps because I had to use the little cash I had to purchase groceries for my family. I also had to start doing small side work with Instacart, DoorDash to make a few extra dollars. Senate Bill 2 is important to me because I feel that everyone that's on SNAP that has had their benefits stolen should be able to feel safe using their benefits, not have to worry if there's going to be any funds on their cards the next day or not. I also think that all stolen funds should be replaced if stolen. What happened was not my fault, and I feel that they should be refunded if possible. There are many things that my children would be able to do with that money. I could restock my refrigerator and my freezer for them. They could buy things that they like from the store. I just think that everyone that's had their cards skimmed and money stolen should be able to get their funds back.
Right, and I am going to take us next to Maya's testimony. Maya was another one of the individuals with lived experience that we worked with who came down to Annapolis with her child to share her story.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us, Senate, and everyone in the committee. My name is Maya Brown, and I'm a resident in Baltimore City. I recently, because of the theft and because I lost my card, we have become homeless, and we had to wait 3 months to get anything reimbursed. And I basically went there, I would say numerous times in the week, and the behavior that they have, towards us, being a disabled veteran, it is just unempathetic. So by me asking them constantly to replace it. Even though we didn't have it, I never received it. They would just tell me to just wait. They couldn't print the card out. I was just unaware, like, why? Because of this, also my SNAP, my TCA benefits is also on that card. So that's why we became homeless, because for 3 months, I kept telling my landlord that, DHS, which he didn't want to hear, has my benefits. And I just felt like embarrassed. So I'm just happy that this law is going to be passed, because this really is a relief for me, everyone else, my daughter, because of COVID. Now I'm a single mom, and it's very stressful. You don't know, it's very stressful because I have to have her with me 24/7 unless I'm sleeping. So I really appreciate every one of you fighting for us and, the single moms, because if I didn't have it and I wasn't able to get these benefits, I really don't know what would have happened, because I don't have family here. And like I told you, because of COVID, that's why I'm a single mom. So it's very hard, and this is a great help, it really helps me. And I just want to tell y'all how much I appreciate it. I can't say it enough. So thank you so much for everything that y'all are doing.
I think one of the reasons we really like Renee's testimony and also Maya's testimony is just she was kind of speaking into existence, thanking the legislators who were hearing the bill for passing it before it's passed. So it was good that she was speaking that into existence, because they did pass it. So we
thank you.
Go next to Michelle to talk to us about what does this new law do?
So it's so great to be here and talk about it as like the law passed, like you said, Ashley. So it puts into the Maryland statute a right to replacement of both SNAP and cash benefits in the amount that was lost due to theft. So no cap on the amount that can be reimbursed. And there's no limit on how many times you can get replacement benefits. If a theft occurs, you have a right to get replacement benefits in the amount that was stolen. And this all needs to happen within 10 days of you reporting the benefits were stolen. The statute now defines theft broadly. So anytime a theft occurs, you will get replacement, and theft includes physical theft of the actual EBT card. It also includes identity fraud and skimming. The statute prohibits the department from requiring police reports as a condition of receiving replacement of benefits. In pretty much all the cases, like the department has the information already to verify that a theft occurred just by pulling up the EBT spending history, or the individual family can write a self affidavit. So police reports were not necessary or helpful at all, and it was just a barrier for folks, and we just wanted to make sure it was clear that to receive replacement benefits, you do not have to file a police report. Also, if the department determines that a theft did not occur, the individual has a right to file an appeal and to receive their benefits as a replacement during the appeal. So that, the appeals process can sometimes take, 2 to 3 months from start to when you get a decision from a judge. So during that time, the individual can receive replacement benefits and does not have to further experience hunger or housing insecurity while they're waiting for the judge to issue their decision. The bill also has, so I guess just taking a step back, while the legislative process was underway, I had mentioned earlier there was a new secretary of the department in mid-January, and it also around that time, and I think JD will talk more about this, the federal USDA, or United States Department of Agriculture, informed states that they could use federal funds to reimburse stolen SNAP benefits October 1st of 2022. So while session was pending, the new secretary of the department announced that beginning in, I think it was mid-March that Maryland would start replacing stolen benefits, but only stolen as of October 1st of 2022. So the bill actually has a further, like a retroactive period. So any benefits stolen on or after January 1st of 2021 are also now going to be reimbursed. And this is, I think we have a slide later with the data on this, but I think that period of time, January 1st, 2021 till October, was just over 1,000 households and close to $1 million in replacement benefits. And that is data the department has. It's probably a lot more once word gets out that the department is actually replacing benefits. More households might be willing to come forward knowing that the department is now going to replace benefits to seek reimbursement. We had, in the initial bill, we had requested retroactive benefits to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, or I guess the declaration of it, which was March 15th of 2020, but the General Assembly amended this date to January 1st of 2021. So that's about 21 months on top of what the department began doing on its own in March. And then finally, it requires coordination between the department and the EBT card vendor to take a number of different security measures to overall reduce the vulnerability of EBT cards to theft. Probably the most important of which is including a microchip on the EBT cards that are issued on or after October 1st of 2023. So just like the credit cards have that updated technology, starting in October, any cards issued after that date, the department will need to include the microchip technology on those cards. And there's a number of other security measures too, but that's probably the most significant.
Thank you. I'm going to pass this to Michelle. Did you want to just share with us briefly this quote from the new department secretary?
Sure. So a couple weeks ago, the bill SB 2 HB 502 was signed into law. And I should say we did have that consensus draft, and the department actually came to the bill hearings, testified very strong support of the bills. Department also came to the bill signing ceremony with the governor. And so this was the department's press release. The first quote is by Governor Moore, who is also very much in strong support of this and allocated a lot of funding. If federal funds can cover a lot of it, but if federal funds cannot, state funds can be used. And so Governor Moore made sure there was enough state funding to replace all the benefits. So Governor Moore's quote was, by signing this legislation into law, we are taking deliberate action to help restore faith in some of our most needed services and supports. Maryland is again showing leadership in ensuring that some of our most vulnerable citizens will receive the help they need. And then the department secretary, Rafael Lopez, said it's an egregious act to steal from someone who most needs help. We believe the way Maryland is responding will not just set the tone for this state, but for the country. Not only does this new law expand stolen benefit reimbursement eligibility, it helps our department with the tools we need to strengthen EBT card security and decrease EBT fraud.
Thank you. And JD, can you walk us through the federal relief versus Maryland's law?
Yeah, absolutely. As we were kind of having discussions with legislators and eventually moving things into hearings, a lot of stuff was happening behind the scenes at the federal level. And part of this was initial conversations we were having with Representative Dutch Ruppersberger about introducing legislation at the end of 2022 to address fraud at the national level. This, thankfully, was kind of wrapped up in omnibus legislation, in a large omnibus spending bill passed at the end of last year that approved USDA to offer federal funds in relief for any state that wanted to introduce a plan to reimburse those that had had their SNAP benefits stolen. So a couple of comparisons do need to be made between the federal plan and the state legislation that was just passed. First and foremost is that the federal relief is not immediate. States had to create a plan and then had to get those approved by Food and Nutrition Services at USDA. Maryland, holding true to its promise, was the first state in the country to pass this plan. In fact, we are it was us. I think Vermont actually plan was the second to just get approved. We were very much the guinea pig for all of this in the nation, and I'll talk a little bit more about kind of how our own state was a model for other states that are kind of coming into the fold under the federal legislation. Unfortunately, the federal plan only covers theft kind of in the future. So when it was implemented over the course of 2022 into 2023, this reimbursement only covers SNAP benefits that were stolen between October 1st of last year up through October 1st of 2024, technically September 30th of 2024. And it was kind of because of this that we had this state plan that DHS knew that they were working on and knew that they were working with USDA, that we were actually kind of able to shape our own legislation to not only match what was happening, but also make sure we were having this retroactive period, and then also really dialing in on the fact that we don't want a cap. The federal reimbursement only covers up to 2 months of stolen benefits, which for folks that have had their benefits stolen 3, 4, hopefully no more than that, they were kind of, left to the side with only saying, well, we can only reimburse 2 of them with this federal plan. And so this kind of allowed us to say, really stick to the original intention of the bill and what we all came to the table with, and say no cap on what we can reimburse at the state level. We want to make sure we make families whole. And then ultimately, again, this argument between SNAP versus cash, the federal plan only covering SNAP benefits, I think even further solidified our original intention of the state legislation to make sure that we're covering cash benefits as well. Because when we really dialed into the data, we saw that cash benefit theft was almost at 50%, maybe even 60% of the SNAP level. And we know that these are funds that families were relying on to make sure that they had additional non-food needs that their families could access as well. Part of the federal legislation also included a deadline on when to file reimbursement claims. This not only says that you have 45 days within noticing the theft to file your claim. There's also a deadline currently for any claims between October of last year and February of this year. I believe at the end of May, all of those claims must be in, or you will not be able to access that federal reimbursement. I don't believe we have a deadline on claims for retroactive benefits, but I know we're having some further conversations with DHS as far as what the actual implementation is going to be. Again, it was signed into law last Monday, and I believe they're maybe hoping for an early July launch, mid-July launch for the actual state reimbursements. Next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about how Maryland is a model. Yeah, so again, we were kind of the guinea pig. A lot of states were looking to us to kind of see how not only implementation goes, but also what the back and forth process between the proposed plan and the actual plan came out on the other side after negotiations with FNS and USDA. 10 other states have had their federal plans approved. And fortunately, again, only Vermont has been implemented. The rest of them kind of coming in at the end of May, beginning of June. But we're really excited to see other states kind of taking some of the shared aspects of not only Maryland's original federal plan, but even aspects of our state legislation as they're considering their own in-state reimbursement bills. So first and foremost is just the timeline for reimbursement. That 10 days was something that I think a lot of states were pushing really, really hard on to make sure that folks were getting their benefits in a timely manner. Again, Michelle, mentioning that this waiting period for getting your benefits back is devastating for families. So that 10-day period was really solid. Next was attestation. When you're saying, hey, my benefits were stolen, just signing a document saying that was all that is going to be needed for the majority of states that are having their federal plan approved. And then really the big point here is state validated information. There's kind of this back and forth some states were having of, well, we need to have the client or whoever's reporting the theft prove that their benefits were stolen, which is something that is a really heavy lift for folks, especially if they're already experiencing poverty, have had their benefits stolen, they have enough on their plate. When really the state and the state agency can just look at the data. They can say, all right, you were clearly not in Texas 3 months ago, or you were not clearly in this part of your state 2 weeks ago. We can track these benefits as they're being used, and we can kind of tell, okay, yeah, they were clearly stolen. And then finally, the rights to a fair hearing. this, again, kind of pulling from the state legislation as well, that folks are able to have a fair hearing if they need to dispute any of the decisions that are being made by their state agency in regards to their reimbursement, and especially around things like data discovery versus data theft. So again, you have folks that may not have used their benefits in a while, and then they notice, oh, a couple of maybe months later, when they do start to use their SNAP or they start to use their cash, their benefits were stolen and they need to get those benefits back. And having the deadline meeting the date of discovery versus the actual date of theft, this coming into a really true thing for a client that I was working with, a gentleman from Frederick who was in recovery for a while and was not using his SNAP benefits because all of his meals were being paid for. The program he was at is released, he finishes his recovery, starts to use his benefits again, notices that they're all stolen. And he was expecting to have them saved up over that course of time, and he noticed that they were all gone. If it was a date of theft versus a date of discovery, he would not have been able to file that reimbursement claim because the theft happened months ago as opposed to the date of discovery when he kind of realized what was happening when he started to use his benefits. Next slide, please. So I think Michelle and I are going to kind of cover this section in tandem. So how's it going? So it's both really encouraging to see that folks are able to access this fraud claim report and do things on their own. It's also extremely troubling when we start to look at the data and what the truth is kind of coming out as to the sheer scale of what's happening. So in our own organization, we do operate a toll-free hotline that anyone in the state can call in from. We've also partnered with the Department of Human Services to act as a referral hub for anyone that is struggling or unable to do the form on their own. It's available on the MD Think website. It's something that actually ourselves, Ashley and Michelle and other organizations possibly on this call helped test before they even launched it statewide, which was kind of new. They've never really allowed us to test anything before, so that was really great. And at our own organization, we've fielded around 31 calls so far, and of that, we've only submitted 16 claims. The fact that we've only had 31 people call in since the form first launched about a month and a half ago is kind of a testament to how well it's working on its own. And of those 31 calls, having only filed 16 claims, the remainder of those folks saying, oh, they just had a question, or, oh, I can go to the office and do it on my own, great. Or I just clarifying something on the form. It's clearly working as it's intended. And of the folks that we filed claims for, everyone has gotten their reimbursement within 5 days. So even this 10-day window has actually been dramatically shorter than we were expecting. And again, this is all just kind of really good news. However, there's some bad news, and thankfully I can kick that over to Michelle to kind of talk about.
So yeah, and HPRP has had a similar experience with folks receiving reimbursement very quickly after applying. So it's nice to see that the process is working. But I think the bad news is just how far-reaching theft of benefits was in Maryland. It was a lot more than the data that the department had, which makes sense because, if the department was not reimbursing benefits, people probably stopped at some point filing claims when they heard the department was not reimbursing. So as of, I think, end of April, this was the data that came from the department that for theft of benefits from October 1st of 2022 ongoing, so far the department has approved over 6,800 claims for replacement of stolen SNAP and cash benefits. So that's not just number of people, that's households. So this is having just such an impact throughout the state, and that totals over $4.3 million in reimbursement of benefits. And again, going back to what we shared in the beginning, these are means-tested benefit programs. The benefit is actually very low, even if you qualify for it. So to hear that over $4.3 million was stolen from Marylanders since October is just appalling. But we are grateful that there's now a process in place to provide that reimbursement quickly. And then, so going back to the bill for claims of stolen benefits between January 1st, 2021 through when the department started replacing benefits in October, according to the department's data, Maryland will reimburse at least $826,000 in stolen food and cash benefits, and that's from 1,095 households. That's the data the department already has and can reimburse. But once we get the word out that this bill passed, and families and individuals who experienced theft during that time are now eligible for reimbursement, there will likely be more households eligible and applying. And so Governor Moore approved $1.8 million in state general funds to cover that retroactive period. And HPRP is putting out a series of like YouTube kind of know your rights or how-to videos just to further explain the process. So I'll drop in the chat our YouTube channel, which we do talk about how to apply for reimbursement. The three main ways are either going in person to a local DSS office, applying online in that link we dropped in the chat, or connecting with a SNAP outreach organization to apply over the phone. I think that's actually our next slide. Yeah, so this is to apply for reimbursement online. That's the link which we put in the chat. And then here are a number of different SNAP outreach organizations that are assisting folks who would like to do it by phone or who need assistance. Maryland Hunger Solutions being a really great one, statewide representation. For any of these, we recommend, the person calling leaves a message with their name and callback number, because usually the SNAP outreach organization will call back to do the appointment. And if folks are getting denied their claims for reimbursement and would like to request free legal assistance, they can contact us at HPRP for free legal representation in a denial. And I'm going to just drop in the chat our YouTube link so that we have one video on how to apply for reimbursement, and then now that the bill was signed into law, we have another one coming out very soon about the new law and changes.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Michelle and JD. And I did want to just highlight that the legislation, the creation of this legislation really is the brainchild of HPRP, Michelle, in creating the initial draft of this bill and really helping have a tool for us to be able to bring everyone to the table to continue to shape into something that would really help Maryland's families. And we're just going to close out this presentation with our lovely pictures from our bill signing. So the bill was signed into law sometime last week, and it was a really beautiful ceremony. You can see here at the bottom that Maya and her child were able to meet the governor and shake his hand. And I think, if I remember correctly, when he handed her a commemorative pen, he said, she's going to use this to sign bills one day. And it's just really heartwarming. So that is the end of our presentation, and we're just going to jump right into our discussion. So these are just some questions to get us started off. But any questions that you have for us, please feel free to ask them. You can put them in the chat. You can also come off mute to ask your question. But we would love to hear what surprised you or stuck with you from this presentation. What questions do you have for us? And do you have any recommendations on how we can further our advocacy on this issue, whether that's working with other organizations, coalitions, outreach, etc.?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. This resonated with me because my daughter called me in the wee hours of the morning in December 2022. Mom, I have nothing on my card. And the process for her was horrific. She went to DSS. She called the police to get a report. She even saw a police officer. Nothing happened. She called 211. She spoke to someone who was supposed to call her back. Like, the process was horrific. Until today, she does not have a refund. She filed a report online, and when she called the police station that was nearest to her, he said, was it from Florida or was it from New York? He said, we're getting these calls all the time. It was a horrific process. And when I heard about this, I gave her the information. She filed. Now she's waiting to get a refund. But when I say devastating, devastating. It was the holiday time, but most importantly, it was money that she relied on to be able to sustain her and her children. So people do it with no consciousness, millions of dollars. I never even knew this happened until it happened to someone I love. So I am so glad when I saw that this bill became a law and it was happening. I'm also a case manager. So I was able to give that information when a member came to me and said, Ms. Davis, someone took my money off my card. Someone we have a resolution to be a part of any advocacy for this to get the word out. Thank you, thank you, thank you all. Thank you for your testimonies, ladies, because I know it wasn't easy to tell your story. Thank you for your transparency. And let's just do this work. Let's make Maryland the state we want to see, and the United States the country that we want to see, helping each other, not hurting each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lenora. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everyone here. Thank you so much for sharing your daughter's personal story. It's not lost on us. We've heard so many stories like that, especially people who experience this during holidays, and just how devastating that can be when you have plans. You're feeding the children. You might be planning to have a big holiday celebration, and then you find that your benefits are gone. It's devastating. And I think all of us also are so relieved to hear that she was able to file the application to get her benefits back and to start that process. And again, thank you as well for your work as a caseworker, as a case manager, in helping share this information with people. And if you private message me your contact information, we're happy to keep you looped in on any advocacy around this. There are also some fantastic resources that our organizations and many others have worked with the Department of Human Services on, some social media tools and other outreach tools to help community members know about that this reimbursement is happening. And I believe they're available in English and in Spanish. So thank you. And
thank you.
Thank you. And I will call on Kate.
That's actually exactly what I was going to ask, where I can find the social media tools.
Yes, so we can drop a link in the chat, actually. I think it's also in this presentation that we'll send out to people. I'm going to try to pull that up as we're talking. But yes, the Department of Human Services, it should be when you go to their website. I'm not sure if they still have it on the banner of their website. But when you go to their website, you should be able to see something around like EBT theft reimbursement. And then when you click on that landing page, it can also be translated into Spanish. There's an application. There's also the outreach material. So we will certainly send those out to people. Thank you.
I think I just found it.
Oh, okay, great.
I'll try to put it in the chat too. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody else have questions or thoughts, anything that resonated with you from this presentation?
I just wanted to thank you all, first of all, for this presentation, which was amazing, and more importantly, for the work you did to get this passed. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Terry Stoudenmeyer with the ABLE Foundation, and we fund all three organizations, so it's incredibly gratifying to see the results of this joint effort. And I guess I'd love to know, now that you have this new relationship with a new administration, what's next on the horizon for benefits advocacy?
That's a great question. And Michelle and JD, feel free to chime in as well. I think next steps for this is definitely monitoring implementation. We did seems like receive an early commitment from DHS that we just want to confirm that they will be reimbursing people going all the way back to January 1st, 2021, and what their plan is on how to do that, what happens when the federal funds run out, dipping into that state money. There's also some reporting requirements in the new law that DHS will need to provide reports on how many thefts have occurred, and a lot of different data. And I'm sure that all of our organizations will also want to be involved in advocacy around the security enhancements that DHS will be looking at with their EBT card vendor, and ensuring that we're getting community feedback as well on, what are the key security protections. We know people need microchips, the microchipping technology for the cards, so they're just as secure as credit and debit cards, but also, the card locking features. What is going to be most useful for families that are, have been vulnerable to this issue? JT and Michelle, did you have anything to add about future advocacy and work that we're looking at for this?
I can jump in really quickly, just kind of going off the card features thing. So our contract with Conduit is coming to a close soon, and that is something that is very much at the kind of priority of our list, is kind of renegotiating what that looks like. And this is also something that other states are very heavily invested in as well, as Ashley was saying. It's just card security needs to be kind of paramount for, are we going to renew our contract with you again? On top of that is definitely, I feel like we had a meeting with advocates and DHS a while ago, and we were all kind of singing like a whole new world together, and just I think benefit adequacy and access are definitely on the table as well. The timing of this bill works really well because we just lost emergency allotments at the end of February, so everyone's had their benefits decreased, and most people's benefits were stolen at a time when they were maximized. So getting that back has been a huge boon for families, and will continue to be once the state reimbursement plan kicks in. But because of that huge decrease, we've seen other states do raising of minimums. New Jersey just raised their minimum to $95 a month. So if you're on SNAP, you get no less than $95. That is massive. That's nearly double than what the second state behind that is. And we're still only raising older adults to $40. We think that there's a lot more that we can do with that, with just raising everyone's across the board, but then also benefit access. We know that a lot of folks have issues at the renewal phase of their application process, and they're still having a lot of language access issues just across the board, across all programs. So we really want to work closely with the department on not just making sure that, one, we shore up language access, and two, whatever can be done for raising the benefit levels for families, we're doing that too.
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, thank you so much for all your support, all the foundations who came today, and we couldn't do this work without the support and funding to do so. And we really are grateful that we have that ability. And so I think the sense we were getting from the General Assembly was that they wanted to give the department a chance to shine, let's see what the department is willing to do on their own, as opposed to let's legislate and require them to do something. I think with this bill, we were, grateful to have the department's support. And I think that allowed, the department asking and coming in and testifying in support allowed the General Assembly to kind of put the protections in statute so that it doesn't matter, who's in control in the future. These protections are now in law, and it's not up to the discretion of the department secretary. But I think more generally, it's going to be interesting to see how this summer goes. We're going to be meeting with the department, advocates in the department, to really get a sense of what the department's willing to do on their own versus what we need to go into next legislative session to ask the General Assembly to change the law about. JD highlighted some of the SNAP landscape. I think with the temporary cash assistance, there's a lot more that Maryland can do. We've done some really great bills in the past that move Maryland's TCA program in an anti-racist, trauma-informed direction, and there's a lot more work we can do. I think the department can do a lot of it on its own if it wants to, and I really hope they'll partner with us on that. But there's always, the legislative process if that's not possible. I think one area that would be great to see is Maryland reallocating some of the federal the federal term is TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, reallocating a greater percentage of the TANF funds towards families that receive TANF. So in Maryland, less than 30% of the overall TANF budget actually goes to families, and there's a lot of other uses of TANF funds. So we'd like to see a much larger percentage, and we're hopeful that we can engage in advocacy this summer with the department to see what they're willing to do.
Thank you. And I see Christina has her hand up.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, I didn't know if you would mind pulling up the DHS website. I know you can't speak on behalf of DHS, but they do seem to list some deadlines, and they don't list January 1st, 2021 as a date that people can seek reimbursement for yet. Has there been conversation about updating the website? And are there any thoughts on approaching the department about that?
Yes, so thank you for asking that. I think this might be, and like you said, we can't speak on behalf of the department, but my guess is that this may be because the bill was just signed into law last Monday. So, but I'm so happy that you flagged that. We will certainly reach out to them today to ensure that they update that website quickly so that people know. I don't know if we mentioned this, the legislation was emergency legislation. So it was in effect the moment it was signed into law, and we walked out of there, walked out of there with our hands up and clapping. So we'll definitely let them know this so they can go ahead and update their website. Thank you.
And no, thank you. Secondarily, I might have missed this, but I just wanted to clarify or get clarification with regard to the reimbursements and if there's a dispute and requesting a hearing. There was a mention that it's a 10-day reimbursement process, but if the department doesn't think there was theft, what does that look like in terms of requesting a hearing? Is that process expedited? What do you anticipate that looking like?
Yeah, Michelle, did you want to walk us through that?
Sure. So thank you, Christina, for the questions. And I'm going to drop in the chat the department's press release from the bill signing. Actually, that didn't do the link. I'll get the link. But I think you're right. We do need to see an update quickly to the website. And it's not only the retroactive period, but also the department up until now had only been issuing partial replacement of benefits, so they would cap it at 2 months. So you heard Renee testify at the bill hearing that she had $3,000 stolen, and that was because there was a several-month period where her case had been wrongly processed, so when her benefits were approved, it was the full amount she was owed for several months, and then they got stolen immediately. So just an example of why full replacement of benefits is so important, and the bill now requires that. So also anytime a theft occurs, that's another new change. So also, Christina, if you'd be interested in joining a meeting, or anyone else on this call, a meeting with us and the department to talk about implementation, we'd welcome that, and feel free to reach out and we can loop you in to those meetings. About the appeals process, so with all public benefits, you have a right to appeal any decision you disagree with. Great, Lenora, we'll count you in. And your right to file the appeal is 90 days from the decision. So in this case, if the department determines no theft occurred, you would have 90 days to file an appeal. What's different and unique about this appeal, it's the same appeals process where you go before the Office of Administrative Hearings, you have a hearing with an administrative law judge. What's different and exciting about this process is you will get your benefits continuing during the appeal. In regular public benefit appeals, you can get that as a right, but only if you file the appeal within 10 days, which, by the time the mail reaches you, and it's very easy to miss that 10-day window. So what's unique about this process is when you file the appeal within that 90-day period, you will get your benefits continuing while the appeal is pending. And if you lose your appeal, it's the department can recoup the benefits that you were issued, but a very, very small amount. I think the statute says the lesser or the greater of either $5 a month or 10% of your benefits. So the idea being, we don't want families to have to wait 3 months and receive an eviction notice, not have food that whole time, only to hear a judge say what they knew all along, and that yes, a theft occurred. So the appeals process is exactly the same as it is for all public benefit appeals with OAH, and you file the appeal in the same way, and I can talk one-on-one with anyone who's interested in that process.
Thank you.
The third question, if you'll tolerate it.
Yes, we will.
The third question I have relates to MD Think. It's a very challenging system for a lot of clients. A lot of the discussion was focused on the cards and the theft that occurred as a result of magnet technology. And I'm not a technological expert, but I didn't know if there were recommendations or should be recommendations as far as MD Think, if there is an issue of hacking or just issues with theft regarding the challenges in navigating that system to begin with.
That's another great question. JD, would you mind answering that one?
Yeah, happy to talk that one. So MD Think, for folks that have navigated or tried to, we know is not a wonderful system. It's getting there. It's fully implemented in the state last January, and we're still kind of seeing it in its infancy, kind of learning how to actually get things done. It's still not the easiest thing to navigate, but I think we're all starting to kind of get a better idea of it. As far as the hacking and data breach conversation goes around MD Think, again, not a cybersecurity expert, but I think that it was one of the main focuses of that platform entirely was to shore up these security features, because on my DHR, that was when the last data breach happened, and inside internally a DHS and in Baltimore City. And so cybersecurity was a main feature of MD Think, which is kind of what we're being told is why the system isn't amazing, which is kind of a weird trade-off at this point, but we also are seeing a lot of improvements to the platform happening. They're happening slowly. These are technological changes to a huge platform for SNAP, cash, energy, medical assistance, so we know that they're going to take some time. But at the same time, we do want to push the department a little bit more to kind of show them that there are a lot of issues with this MD Think system. There's a lot of inequities and a lot of lack of access to it as well. How it plays into the conversation around benefit theft, I think it's kind of hard to say at the moment. I know there was an article that came out from the Baltimore Banner that talked about data breaches at both the DHS level and also at Conduent, which was, I think, the main one that they were focusing on. As far as the cybersecurity aspect of all of this. By just a conversation I had with a friend who's in cybersecurity, the one thing he said that stuck with me, it was basically, I'm surprised this hasn't happened sooner. The fact that the EBT system at large needs to just be improved in general. But yeah, it's a great question and definitely something that we're going to be pushing DHS on a little bit more, just to be maybe a little bit more transparent about any future breaches, about the past one that happened as well, and just making sure MD Think is as airtight as possible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that we are pretty much out of time for additional questions, but I did want to say, and I didn't show our last slide in this presentation, which we are going to send out to everyone who's attended, has our contact information. If you have any questions after this presentation, want to connect with us around this advocacy and future advocacy with the Department of Human Services, please reach out. We would love to have you. And thank you so much to our presenters, to our allies from Maryland Hunger Solutions and Homeless Persons Representation Project for being part of this presentation and for collaborating and really just getting the word out and helping us to bring community members into the fold on all of this advocacy. Thank you.